The phone rang just after 9:45 a.m. Carla's heart jolted in her chest, an unfamiliar tension running through her veins. She glanced at the caller ID. It wasn't Mia, her 16-year-old daughter, nor was it her husband, Greg. Instead, it was the school. Fear twisted in her stomach. A million thoughts ran through her mind as she reached for the phone, her hands shaking. Could something have happened to Mia? Was there an emergency? She pressed the answer button quickly, trying to steady her breath. Hello? Carla's voice cracked, betraying the panic rising in her chest. Mrs. Carter? The voice on the other end was calm, too calm, but there was a certain edge to it that made Carla's skin prickle. This is Principal Harris from Ridgewood High. We need you to come to the school immediately. It's urgent. Her blood ran cold. Is everything okay? Is Mia all right? Carla's voice was laced with fear, her mind racing through countless possibilities. The principal hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice still even, but with an undertone of concern that didn't escape Carla. Your daughter is fine physically. But we need you here. Now. Carla didn't wait another second. She dropped the phone, her mind already in overdrive. Mia, her only child, was the center of her world. No one ever prepares for the kind of call that makes you drop everything and run. Carla grabbed her keys, fumbling with them in her hands as panic set in. She didn't know what was wrong, but the knot in her stomach told her it wasn't good. She slammed the door behind her, nearly tripping over the porch steps as she raced toward her car. The engine roared to life with an urgency that mirrored the pounding of her heart. The drive to Ridgewood High was a blur, the streets flying past her in a haze. She tried calling Greg, but the phone rang endlessly. What could have happened? What was so urgent? Carla's mind refused to slow down. As she turned into the school's parking lot, her anxiety increased. The lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered around, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. A teacher, a woman Carla didn't recognize, was standing by the entrance, her expression somber as she waved Carla over. She didn't say a word but led Carla through the halls, her footsteps echoing against the stark walls. Carla's chest tightened. The silence around them seemed too thick, too heavy. Why was there no noise? No students talking or laughing? Everything felt wrong. They reached the principal's office, where Mia sat, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Carla's heart sank. Mia was never one to show fear. She was a resilient girl, strong and independent. To see her like this, something was terribly wrong. The principal, a middle-aged man with graying hair, stood next to Mia, his hands folded in front of him. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. We've had a situation. But your daughter is safe for now. What happened? Carla demanded, her voice sharp with concern. She turned to Mia, her gaze softening. Mia, honey, what's going on? Are you okay? Mia didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes darted nervously toward the principal before returning to her mother. She opened her mouth as if to speak but then closed it, as if she couldn't find the words. Mia, please. You're scaring me. What's going on? Carla's voice cracked as her worry turned to panic. Mia swallowed hard before finally speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I didn't want to tell you, but I have to now. It's important. Carla knelt beside her daughter, her hands resting gently on Mia's shoulders. Whatever it is, you can tell me. You know that. Mia's hands trembled as she handed her mother a crumpled piece of paper. Carla's heart skipped a beat. It was a note, folded in half, written in Mia's unmistakable handwriting. I've seen something, Carla read aloud, her eyes moving across the paper. It's not what you think. Don't send me back here. They're watching. Carla's pulse quickened. She looked at Mia, her mind spinning. What do you mean? Who's watching you? What's going on? Mia's eyes welled up with tears. She wiped them away quickly, as if embarrassed by her vulnerability. Mom, I don't know how to explain this, but something strange is happening at school. I've seen things, heard things I shouldn't. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to scare you, but now I have no choice. The principal stepped forward, his expression grave. Mrs. Carter, I wish I could explain all of this, but it's beyond our control at this point. What your daughter is telling you is true. There's something happening at this school that no one can explain. Carla's mind was a blur of questions, her chest tightening with each passing second. What do you mean, something happening? What's going on here? Is Mia in danger? You have to tell me. The principal hesitated before answering, his eyes flickering toward Mia. There's been an investigation underway for some time. We've been trying to keep it quiet, but we're at a breaking point. Mia might have accidentally uncovered something we can't explain. Mia looked away, her face pale. It's not just me, Mom. There are other students, too. I overheard things in the hallways. I've seen people whispering, but it wasn't just normal talking. It was like they were planning something. Something big. And I think I've figured out who's behind it. Carla's mind raced as she processed what Mia was saying. Who could be behind something like this? Why would they be targeting students? What kind of danger was her daughter in? The principal gave a nod, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was heading. Mrs. Carter, I don't have all the answers. I don't even know who is involved or what their ultimate goal is. But I can tell you this, your daughter is important. She knows too much, and now they know she knows. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the tension palpable. Carla felt as if the walls were closing in on her. What had Mia gotten herself into? How could she protect her from something that was so unclear and yet so dangerous? Mom, I don't want to go back to school, Mia's voice broke, and her eyes pleaded for understanding. They're watching me. They know what I know. I can't go back there. The principal's eyes softened with sympathy. We'll take the necessary steps, Mrs. Carter. But it might be a good idea to keep Mia home for a while. Until we figure out what's really going on. Carla's mind whirled. She wanted to protect Mia. She wanted to believe this was some misunderstanding, that it wasn't as serious as it seemed. But deep down, she knew something was wrong, something dangerous was happening, and her daughter was right in the middle of it. I don't know what's going on, but I promise you, we're going to get to the bottom of this, Carla said, her voice steady despite the panic raging inside her. The principal nodded. We'll do everything we can to help. But for now, I'd advise you to keep Mia safe. Carla glanced down at her daughter, her heart aching with a mix of fear and protective instinct. We're leaving, Mia. We're going home. Mia nodded silently, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As they walked out of the principal's office, Carla's mind was consumed with 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was watching her daughter? What secret had she uncovered? And why hadn't Mia told her sooner? Carla didn't know the answers, but she was about to find out. And whatever the truth was, it was more shocking than she could have ever imagined. Carla sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note Mia had handed her earlier. The paper was still crumpled, but her eyes never left the words. She had read it a dozen times since she left the school, trying to make sense of it. I've seen something. It's not what you think. Don't send me back here. They're watching. What was Mia talking about? What had she seen, and who was watching her? Carla's mind felt like a storm, whirling with questions that had no answers. Her hands trembled as she folded the note, her thoughts spiraling out of control. Mia had been quiet since they got home. She'd gone straight to her room without saying a word, as if she couldn't process what was happening either. Carla understood. This wasn't just any normal school issue. There was something much darker at play, and her daughter was in the middle of it. After a few moments of silence, Carla stood up and made her way to Mia's room. She knocked gently on the door before pushing it open. Mia, honey, can we talk? Carla's voice was soft, as if she was walking on fragile ground. Mia was sitting on her bed, her legs crossed beneath her, staring blankly out the window. She didn't look up when Carla entered. Carla walked over and sat beside her daughter, placing a hand on her knee. Mia, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we need to talk about this. I need to know what's going on. We need to figure this out together. Mia's eyes slowly turned toward her mother, but there was a sadness in them that Carla had never seen before. Mia wasn't the type to let fear control her. She was strong, independent, the girl who always spoke her mind. But now, she was a shadow of that girl. I never wanted you to find out this way, Mom, Mia whispered. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid. Paranoid about what? Carla pressed, her heart pounding. Mia hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. It started a few weeks ago. I overheard a conversation in the hallway. Some of the teachers were talking, but it wasn't about school stuff. It was about something else. At first, I thought I was just hearing things, but then I saw it. I saw one of the students, Jeremy, sneaking into the back office after hours. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think much of it at first. Carla sat up straighter. Jeremy? What does he have to do with this? Mia took a deep breath before continuing. He's not who he says he is. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but it's definitely not good. One day, I followed him after school. I was trying to see where he was going, and I saw him meet with Mr. Keegan, the history teacher. They were talking in hushed voices, but I could hear bits of what they were saying. They were talking about a project, something big. And then, I heard them mention names. My name, Mom. They were talking about me. They said I had to be dealt with. A chill ran down Carla's spine. What do you mean, dealt with? Mia's face grew pale as she wiped away a tear. I don't know. But it didn't sound good. I've been seeing strange things ever since. People looking at me like they know something I don't. Mr. Keegan, Jeremy. I don't trust them. They're hiding something. And I think I'm in danger. Carla's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just some school rumor. Mia was in real danger, and it was getting worse. Mia, I don't know what's going on, but I promise you, we'll figure this out. I'll protect you, no matter what. Mia nodded, but there was a distant look in her eyes. I don't want to go back, Mom. I'm scared. I don't know who I can trust anymore. Carla hugged her daughter tightly, her own fear threatening to swallow her whole. You don't have to go back right now. But we need to get to the bottom of this. We need answers. But as Carla held her daughter, a sinking feeling gnawed at her. The more Mia talked, the more it sounded like this was much bigger than just one teacher or one student. Whoever was behind this had a plan, and Mia was somehow at the center of it. The question was, why? Carla stood up, her resolve hardening. She knew she couldn't just wait for things to play out. Mia had already uncovered something dangerous. And if they didn't act fast, it could get much worse. I'm going to find out what's really going on at that school, Carla said firmly. But we're going to do it carefully. We don't want to make things worse. Mia looked up at her, her face filled with uncertainty. How? How are we supposed to find out anything? Everyone at that school is involved in this, whatever it is. Carla looked out the window, her mind racing with ideas. We'll start with the people who might know something. We can't go to the police just yet. We need proof, Mia. Hard evidence. But what if they know we're looking into it? Mia asked. What if they come after us? Carla swallowed hard. That's a risk we'll have to take. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner, Carla decided to take action. She couldn't sit around and wait for answers anymore. The danger was real, and she needed to protect Mia. She called her best friend, Claire, who worked as a private investigator. Carla explained what was going on, leaving out just enough to keep things vague, but Claire's reaction was immediate. You're not crazy, Carla. There's something strange happening here, I can feel it. I'll help you, but we need to be careful. We'll start by looking into the people you suspect, Jeremy, Mr. Keegan, and anyone else who might be connected. If Mia's right about what she's seen, we need to find the truth before it's too late. Thank you, Claire. I don't know what else to do. Mia's scared, and so am I, Carla admitted, the weight of her daughter's fear settling heavily on her shoulders. Don't worry, Claire said reassuringly. We'll get to the bottom of this. I'll start pulling records. We'll find a way to expose whatever's going on at that school. After hanging up with Claire, Carla sat down at her computer. She began to search for anything unusual about the school or its staff. She knew it was a long shot, but there had to be something. She dug into old news articles, public records, and even tried searching for any online rumors that might hint at something dark lurking beneath the surface. Hours passed with no breakthroughs, but then Carla stumbled upon a report from a few years ago. It was a small article buried in a local news site, but it caught her eye. The article mentioned a scandal involving Mr. Keegan, nothing too serious, just a few allegations that were quickly swept under the rug. It didn't seem like much, but Carla saved the link anyway. It was a start. The next morning, Carla decided to meet with Claire in person. Together, they could figure out the next steps. As she prepared to leave, Mia came down the stairs, looking more like her old self. I've been thinking, Mia said quietly. What if I'm wrong? What if I misunderstood everything? What if they're just normal teachers and students? Carla placed a hand on Mia's shoulder. Sweetheart, you're not wrong. What you heard, what you saw, it's real. And we're going to find out what's happening. Together. Mia nodded, though her eyes still held a flicker of doubt. Okay. I trust you, Mom. Carla squeezed her daughter's hand, a sense of determination welling up inside her. We'll get through this, Mia. We'll uncover the truth. The following days were a blur for Carla. After the phone call with Claire, she'd spent every free moment trying to gather pieces of the puzzle, trying to figure out just how deep this mystery ran. Mia's school had never seemed unusual before, just a regular school with regular students and teachers. But now, things were different. The veil of normality had been torn away, and in its place, Carla could see something darker, something hidden just beneath the surface. Her search for information had yielded only small, cryptic details, nothing substantial enough to show a clear pattern. The name Jeremy, which Mia had mentioned, came up in a few places online, mostly linked to school activities and a few innocent interactions, but nothing that screamed danger. Mr. Keegan, too, was an enigma. The article Carla had found buried in the local news about a past scandal involving the teacher seemed to be the only lead that gave her any real sense of urgency. Carla leaned back in her chair, staring at the computer screen. She had been sitting there for hours, combing through old records and news articles about the school, the staff, and even some of the students. But everything seemed to come up empty. She ran a hand through her hair, frustrated. There has to be more to this, she muttered to herself. Just then, her phone rang. Carla quickly glanced at the screen, and a sense of relief washed over her when she saw Claire's name. She answered immediately. Hey, Claire. Any news? Carla asked, her voice a little more hopeful than she felt. I've got something, Claire replied, her tone serious. I looked into some of the school's financial records and found something odd. You won't believe this, but the school has been receiving large donations from anonymous sources. These donations are being funneled into programs that don't seem to exist, at least, not publicly. I've traced it back to a few names, and one of them is, wait for it, Mr. Keegan. Carla's heart skipped a beat. Carla closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm of thoughts that were swirling in her head. What do we do now? Keep it low-key for now, Claire advised. If we make any waves, it could tip off whoever's behind this. Let me gather more information first, and we'll go from there. Okay, Carla agreed. Just keep me posted. After hanging up, Carla stood up and paced the room, her thoughts heavy with the implications of Claire's findings. It seemed like this was more than just a matter of Mia being in danger from a few overzealous teachers. The whole school seemed to be involved in something much darker, and if it was tied to money, power, and manipulation, Carla knew they had to be careful. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to go down without a fight. Later that night, as Carla lay awake in bed, the events of the past few days kept replaying in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't just paranoia, she felt it in her gut. It was like someone was always one step ahead, like the shadows were closing in. Mia had been quieter than usual. She didn't speak much at dinner, only picking at her food before retreating to her room early. Carla knew her daughter was still processing everything, but she also knew Mia had a quiet strength. She was smart, resourceful, and had a way of seeing things that most people missed. Carla had to trust that Mia would be okay, if only for her own peace of mind. The next morning, Carla decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't wait for Claire to do all the legwork. It was time to confront someone at the school, and she knew exactly who. Mr. Keegan. She had to know what he was hiding. There was no way she was going to sit back while Mia and possibly other children were caught up in something so dangerous. Carla dressed quickly, a determined expression on her face. She had to keep her cool, to act like she wasn't shaken by everything she had uncovered. The moment she walked into the school, she had to appear calm, confident, and collected. When she arrived at the school, Carla went straight to the principal's office. She'd already made an appointment earlier in the week, stating she had some concerns about her daughter's safety. It was time to get answers. The secretary greeted her warmly and gestured toward the principal's office. "You can go in now, Ms. Carson. Principal Stevens is expecting you." Carla nodded and walked in, feeling her heart pound in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but it was nothing like facing the reality. Principal Stevens was sitting behind his desk, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He stood up as she entered, extending a hand. "Good morning, Ms. Carson. How can I help you today?" Carla took his hand firmly. "Thank you for meeting with me, Principal Stevens. I've been concerned about something that's been happening at the school, and I feel it's something we need to address." Principal Stevens motioned for her to sit. "Of course. What's been going on?" Carla sat down, her mind spinning. "It's about one of the teachers, Mr. Keegan. I have reason to believe he's been involved in activities that could endanger my daughter, and I'd like to get some clarification on this." The principal's face immediately changed. His friendly demeanor evaporated, replaced by something more guarded. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Ms. Carson, but Mr. Keegan has been with this school for years. He's a valued member of our staff." Carla didn't back down. "I understand that, but I need to know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. I've done some research, and I've found things that don't add up. I believe you're hiding something from me, and from the rest of the parents." Principal Stevens shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation, Ms. Carson. I assure you, Mr. Keegan's actions are completely in line with school policies." But Carla could see it in his eyes, the hesitation, the discomfort. There was something he wasn't saying, something he was trying to cover up. "If you're hiding something," Carla pressed, "I'll find out, and when I do, I will make sure it's exposed. I won't let my daughter or any other child be put in harm's way." She stood up and turned toward the door, her voice calm but firm. "And if you don't tell me the truth, I will go to the authorities. I won't stop until I get answers." The principal said nothing as she left the office, his face pale, the weight of Carla's words sinking in. As she walked down the hallway, she felt a rush of adrenaline. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she was getting closer. And no matter what it took, she would uncover the truth. Carla's hand shook as she closed the door behind her, stepping back into the cold hallway. She'd just confronted Principal Stevens, and the reaction she'd received was more than she had expected. There was no denying it now. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and it ran much deeper than she had initially thought. Principal Stevens' response, or rather, his lack of one, spoke volumes. He hadn't denied anything, nor had he offered any real explanation. The way he squirmed in his seat, the way his eyes darted nervously as she pressed him for answers, it was enough to confirm her suspicions. But what was going on behind those closed doors? And what did Mr. Keegan have to do with it? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. Carla fumbled to pull it from her purse, her heart still pounding in her chest from the confrontation. It was a message from Claire. "Claire, I found something. Meet me tonight. It's urgent." Carla's pulse quickened. This was it. Claire had found something big, and it was all coming together. But there was no time to waste. She needed to get to the bottom of this now before the mystery slipped further out of her reach. She quickly typed back, "I'm on my way. I'll be there as soon as I can." Carla didn't even wait to lock her car door before getting inside. She drove through the streets with her mind racing, piecing together the few scraps of information she had. The donations from anonymous sources. The shell company. Mr. Keegan's strange behavior. Principal Stephen's obvious discomfort. Was the school a front for something much larger than just a place for education? By the time Carla arrived at Claire's apartment, she was out of breath, her mind tangled in knots. Claire was waiting for her by the door, her expression tense. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Claire remarked as she led Carla into the apartment. Carla didn't waste any time. "What did you find?" "I need to know, Claire. I think we're in way over our heads here." Claire handed her a folder, thick with papers. Carla flipped through it quickly, her eyes scanning the documents. It didn't take long for her to find what Claire was talking about. The first thing that caught her attention was a letter, dated just 3 months ago. It was addressed to the school board, but it was unsigned. It accused the school of using its charitable funds to support a series of covert operations. A list of names, including Mr. Keegan's, were mentioned, each linked to suspicious activities. The deeper Carla read, the more horrifying it became. The letter spoke of under-the-table deals, money laundering, and human trafficking. Carla's heart skipped a beat as she read the names of local business owners and politicians who were allegedly involved. This wasn't just about the school. It was a massive operation that reached far beyond the small town Carla had grown up in. She dropped the letter back into the folder and stared at Claire. "How did you get this?" Claire's face was grim. "I have sources. I've been digging for weeks now. When I followed the trail of money, it led me to this. This is bigger than we thought, Carla. This is an international operation, and it's been using the school as a front. The donations are all going to shell companies tied to human trafficking rings. Mr. Keegan is one of the key players." Carla felt the weight of the words sink in. Her stomach twisted. The school. The teachers. All the things she had once trusted. She had no idea it could be this bad. How does Mia fit into this? Claire's eyes softened. "I don't know yet. But if Mr. Keegan is involved, then it's likely he's using the school to find vulnerable kids. Mia could have been targeted, she's young, she's smart, and she stands out. They might have been keeping an eye on her." Carla's thoughts were racing. It didn't seem real. How could something like this happen under her nose? How could the school she had trusted her daughter with be involved in something so dark? "What do we do now?" Carla asked, her voice trembling. "We go to the police," Claire said firmly. "But we have to be careful. This is bigger than just the school. These people have connections everywhere. We can't just go in guns blazing. We need to build a case, gather more evidence, and then take it to the right people." Carla nodded. She had no idea what they were up against, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth. Whatever it took, she would protect Mia, and anyone else who might be caught in this web of lies. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Carla and Claire worked together, gathering as much evidence as they could. Claire used her connections to dig deeper into the financial records of the school and the shell companies. Carla reached out to parents she trusted, trying to get a sense of whether any of them had noticed anything unusual. But everyone was either too distracted or too fearful to speak up. Carla couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time she stepped out of the house, she felt eyes on her. It was subtle, like a shadow following her every move. At first, she chalked it up to paranoia, but then she started noticing the strange cars parked near her street, the unfamiliar faces that seemed to pop up wherever she went. It was as if someone was keeping tabs on her, on them. One afternoon, while Carla was sitting in the kitchen with Claire, going over some documents, the phone rang. Carla froze when she saw the caller ID. It was Mia. "Hello?" Carla answered, her voice tight with concern. "Mama. I don't feel so good," Mia's voice cracked. "I'm scared." Carla's heart dropped. "What's wrong, baby? Where are you?" "I'm still at school, but I think someone's been following me," Mia whispered. "I keep seeing the same car outside the gates. It's been there all week." Fear gripped Carla's chest. "Mia, don't talk to anyone. I'll be there soon, okay? Just stay inside and lock the door." "I will, Mama," Mia said, her voice shaking. Carla hung up quickly, adrenaline surging through her. She glanced at Claire, who was already standing up, ready to go. "We need to get to the school. Now." The drive to the school felt like an eternity. Every passing second felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of what was happening was pressing down on Carla's chest. Her mind raced with the possibility that someone was targeting Mia, and that whatever this was, it had escalated to a point where it was no longer just about the school or Mr. Keegan. When Carla arrived at the school, she rushed inside, her heart pounding. She found Mia in the office, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. Carla pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly. She didn't know who she was afraid of more, the person who was following Mia or the people who were behind the operation at the school. "We need to get out of here," Carla whispered to Mia. "Now." As they left the office, Carla noticed something odd. Principal Stevens was standing by the window, his eyes focused on them. But it wasn't just a casual glance. His gaze was intense. Almost predatory. Carla's skin crawled, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched even more closely now. She grabbed Mia's hand tightly, and they left the school without another word. Carla could feel the chill of the evening air as she pulled Mia closer to her side. The events of the past few days had left her breathless, consumed with a growing sense of dread. She couldn't shake the image of Principal Stevens' cold, calculating eyes as they watched her leave the school. Something about the way he stood by that window made her blood run cold. He wasn't just a principal, he was a puppet master in a much larger game. But what was his role? And who was pulling his strings? The car ride home felt too quiet. Mia had her head pressed against the window, her eyes staring blankly into the darkness outside. Carla's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every time her mind began to wander to the terrifying implications of what was happening, she pushed it away, determined to focus on the task at hand, keeping Mia safe. When they got home, Carla tried to act normal. She didn't want Mia to see how shaken she really was. But the truth was, Carla felt as if she were teetering on the edge of a cliff, and she didn't know which way to turn. "Mama, are we going to be okay?" Mia asked softly, breaking the silence. Carla took a deep breath before turning to her daughter. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we are, sweetheart. But I need you to be strong right now. You need to trust me." Mia nodded, but the fear in her eyes was impossible to miss. Carla could see it, the same fear she had felt when she was a little girl. The fear of the unknown. But this was worse. Much worse. Carla wasn't just worried for Mia's safety, she was starting to fear for their lives. The next morning, Carla and Claire met again. They had been meeting at odd hours, huddled over documents, piecing together the puzzle that was growing ever more complicated. But something had shifted. This wasn't just a small-time conspiracy. It was something much more dangerous, and the people behind it were powerful. They were willing to do anything to protect their secrets. "We need to find out who's funding these shell companies," Claire said, her voice low and urgent. "If we can trace the money, we can expose everything." Carla nodded. "I agree. But we have to be careful. These people are dangerous. They have connections everywhere, and I don't want Mia to be put in more danger." Claire's face softened. "I know. But we can't back down now. We've come this far, and if we don't act soon, this will only get worse." They spent the next few hours combing through financial records, tracing transactions that led to various bank accounts tied to the shell companies. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the operation. But with every new piece of evidence, the danger grew. Carla couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them, someone who was always one step ahead. Later that night, Carla received a call from an unknown number. Her stomach twisted. She knew it wasn't a coincidence. "Hello," she answered, her voice steady but her heart racing. "Mrs. Daniels," a cold, unfamiliar voice said. "You've been asking the wrong questions." Carla's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "You know exactly who I am." "You're digging too deep, Mrs. Daniels. If you know what's good for you, you'll stop now. For your daughter's sake." The line went dead. Carla stared at her phone, her hands trembling. She knew this wasn't a threat, this was a warning. They were getting closer, and the people behind this were starting to feel cornered. But who was behind it? And how far would they go to silence her? The next day, Carla met with Claire again. She didn't tell her about the call, she didn't want to worry her. But deep down, Carla knew that things had taken a dangerous turn. "I think I know where we need to go next," Claire said, looking over a map of the town. "There's a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's connected to one of the shell companies. I think it's where they're hiding the real money." Carla's heart pounded. "What are you suggesting? We just break in?" "No," Claire said, shaking her head. "But we can find a way in. If we can get inside and see what's really going on, we can expose them. We have to be smart about this. We can't go in blindly." Carla hesitated. Every instinct told her to back away. But she couldn't. She couldn't let it go. Not when Mia was in danger. "Let's do it," Carla said, her voice steady. "But we have to move fast." The warehouse was hidden away, tucked behind tall fences and surrounded by thick trees. Carla parked a few blocks away, her pulse racing as they made their way toward the building. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the dirt road. They moved quickly, staying low, knowing that the fewer people saw them, the better. They reached the back of the warehouse, where a single door was left slightly ajar. Claire motioned for Carla to follow her. The air was thick with tension as they crept inside. The place smelled musty, and the faint sound of machinery echoed in the distance. Carla's eyes darted around the dimly lit room, trying to take in everything at once. "Stay quiet," Claire whispered. They moved through the shadows, inching closer to the main area. From what they could see, it looked like a storage facility. But Carla's gut told her that it wasn't just boxes of merchandise stored in here. No, there was something more. They reached the heart of the warehouse, where they saw something that made Carla's blood run cold. There, in the center of the room, were rows of locked metal cages. Inside each cage were people, vulnerable, terrified people. Some were sitting, others pacing, their eyes wide with fear. Carla's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a money laundering operation, it was a human trafficking ring. She could feel Claire's hand tighten on her arm, and for a moment, neither of them could speak. The reality of what they had uncovered hit them both like a freight train. "Who's behind this?" Carla whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Claire answered, her voice filled with disbelief. "But we need to get out of here. Now." They turned to leave, but just as they reached the door, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Carla froze. They hadn't been alone. They had been followed. A man stepped out from the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and threatening. Carla's heart hammered in her chest. They were cornered. The footsteps grew louder behind them. Carla's heart raced in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like the ticking of a bomb. She could hear the man's breath, slow and deliberate, his presence a heavy weight that made the air feel thick. Claire's grip on her arm tightened, but Carla couldn't bring herself to move. "Who are you?" Carla demanded, her voice betraying none of the fear she felt inside. She had no time for fear now. She needed answers. She needed to make it out of this hellhole alive, and more importantly, she needed to protect Mia. The man stepped forward, his face still hidden by the hood. "You're in over your head," he said, his voice cold and steady. "You have no idea what you've stumbled upon, do you?" Carla swallowed hard, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "I know enough. I know that innocent people are being kept in cages, and I know that you're the one who's behind it all." The man chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made the hairs on the back of Carla's neck stand up. "You think it's that simple?" he asked, stepping closer. "You think you've figured it all out? This is bigger than you, bigger than anyone. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Carla didn't flinch. "Then tell me. Who are you?" The man's lips curled into a smirk, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "I'm someone who's been playing this game long before you even knew the rules. You've been poking around in places you don't belong, and now you're going to pay the price." He raised his hand, and Carla instinctively took a step back, her pulse quickening. Claire, however, was ready. She moved in front of Carla, positioning herself between her and the man. "Stay back," Claire warned, her voice sharp. "We're not afraid of you." The man's smirk faltered for a moment, but he didn't back down. "You should be," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You don't know what's coming." Before Carla could respond, a loud crash rang through the warehouse, followed by the sound of rushing footsteps. The man turned abruptly, his attention momentarily diverted. In that instant, Carla and Claire made their move. They sprinted toward the door, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging through their veins. Carla could hear the man's curses behind them, the sound of his footsteps growing fainter as they raced for the exit. They burst through the door, out into the open air, but their escape was far from guaranteed. The warehouse was surrounded by a high fence, and they didn't have much time before the man's reinforcements arrived. Carla's mind raced, her thoughts jumbled. They needed to get out of there, fast. "Claire, which way?" Carla gasped, looking around desperately. Claire's eyes scanned the area before she pointed to the left. "There's a side road down that way. It leads to a dead end, but we might be able to find a way out." Without hesitation, they turned and sprinted down the narrow path, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Every second felt like a lifetime, and the weight of what they had discovered was beginning to sink in. They weren't just uncovering a criminal operation, they had stumbled upon a network of power and corruption that reached far beyond anything they could have imagined. They reached the end of the road, only to find themselves face to face with a locked gate. Carla's breath hitched in her throat as she pulled at the bars, but it was no use. The gate wouldn't budge. Come on," she muttered, her mind racing. There had to be another way. They couldn't let themselves be trapped. Suddenly, there was a sound from behind them. The man. He had caught up with them. "We don't have much time," Claire said, her voice tight. "We need to think fast." Carla's mind was working in overdrive, but she couldn't see a way out. They were trapped. Just then, the gate creaked. Slowly, it began to open. Carla turned to see a figure standing on the other side. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. He didn't say anything, he simply gestured for them to follow him. Without question, they ran toward him, their hearts pounding in their chests. The man led them through a narrow alley, then into a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the town. It was dark, the air musty and thick with dust. Carla's nerves were on edge, but she kept her focus on the man in front of her, knowing that he was their only chance at escape. They entered a small room, dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The man closed the door behind them, locking it with a click. Carla took a step forward, her voice shaky. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" The man finally removed his hood, revealing a familiar face. Carla's breath caught in her throat. "Ryan," she whispered. Ryan was an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. He had disappeared without a trace after a business deal had gone sour. But now, here he was, standing in front of her, a weary expression on his face. "I never thought I'd see you again," Carla continued, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and relief. "What's going on here? What is all of this?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his eyes dark with frustration. "It's not safe to talk here. We need to get somewhere secure. But I can tell you this, the people behind this operation, they're not just criminals. They're powerful. They've infiltrated every level of society, from local governments to the highest echelons of the corporate world." Carla's heart sank. "So, this isn't just about Mia? This isn't just about the school?" Ryan nodded grimly. "No. This goes far beyond that. This is about control. They've been manipulating people, using fear and money to get what they want. But it's not over yet. There are others who are working against them. People who are just waiting for the right moment to strike." "Who are they?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I can't tell you everything. But I can tell you this, there's a network. It's global, and it's bigger than anything you can imagine. If you want to take them down, you need to be smart. And you need to move fast." Carla felt the weight of Ryan's words settle over her like a heavy blanket. They weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for something much larger than themselves. But how far would they be willing to go? What were they willing to risk? Ryan took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been working on bringing this down from the inside. I can't do it alone. But if you help me, if we work together, we can take them down." Carla looked at Claire, who nodded in agreement. "We're in," she said. Ryan smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "We're going to need all the help we can get." As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Carla realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future. She had always believed that she could protect her daughter from the dangers of the world. But now, she understood that some battles were far larger than anyone could have anticipated. The war wasn't over yet. In fact, it was only just beginning.